Hello, everybody. You are watching Control City Freak. My name is Todd, and this is the YouTube channel where we look at interstate highways and where they are signed to go. So today we are again talking about Interstate 25, I-25. We see I-25 makes a big loop around the front range of the Rocky Mountains, but is otherwise more or less a north-south route between Wyoming and New Mexico, with Colorado in between. Lovely states all, but unfortunately for our purposes, they are three state departments of transportation that are amongst the worst at Control City signing, as we shall see here on southbound I-25. I-25 begins in Buffalo, Wyoming, with the intersection with I-90. So we see 25 South Casper. Fine choice there. One could argue for Cheyenne, but Casper is the second biggest city in Wyoming, so that's a fair pick there. Here we see KC43, Casper 110. And once we get into Casper, I mentioned this in the northbound I-25 video. Casper, looking around Casper is pretty strange. I don't know what they're doing in Casper, but it's kind of weird. This port of entry thing I noted before. I mean, why would you have a port of entry in a city 100 miles away from the state border? Here, it appears the control city for 25 South is Center Street. Center Street itself is the control city. Very weird signage. And they stick with this. So a little further down, our control city becomes McKinley Street as we go through Casper. So yeah, all kinds of weird sign stuff going on in Casper. I don't know what's happening. We do eventually get 25 South Cheyenne, which is the correct choice for this in southern Casper. Although not too far down the road, we meet a mileage sign with Douglas and Wheatland and no sign of Cheyenne, so that's not so great. In one of those towns, Douglas or Wheatland, I forget which though, they do have the sign for 25 South Cheyenne. Here in Cheyenne, this strange intersection with I-80, 25 is signed south for Fort Collins, which I think is new, but I also really don't get. I know Fort Collins is the next city, but and it does make sense to sign Fort Collins north out of Denver, being that it's bigger than Cheyenne and it's in Colorado. But coming from Cheyenne, Denver is such a bigger city that I really think they could skip Fort Collins and just sign South Denver here. We also see 80 East Sydney, but strangely on 80 East on itself, it's signed for Omaha, and 25 is signed south for Denver. So I don't know if these just are old signs that haven't been replaced yet, or if this is the way it is. It's very odd. I do understand South Denver instead of Fort Collins here, though, because Fort Collins traffic would have gotten off in Laramie on 287. So here we have State Line 7, Fort Collins 37. So no sign of Denver whatsoever in Wyoming. Once we do get into Colorado, though, we do start seeing signs for Denver 89. There are no overhead pull-throughs in Fort Collins, but here is a sign you can see with this intersection that we are now going to be on 25 South Denver. And we meet 270, and we get another one of these ridiculous 270 East Aurora, Limon, and Airport. Why do you need three? Just the airport's fine. Just Aurora. Aurora is one of Denver's biggest suburbs, so just Aurora is fine on a 3-digit interstate. Why throw in Limon? No use. There's nothing in Limon. 70, Limon, Grand Junction. I think I'm going to say it. We're still not going to talk about Limon. Ooh, you pass this on 24, or on 25 south through downtown Denver. This is one of my least favorite sites on I-25, the new Mile High Stadium. As a Chiefs fan, it's probably the building in the NFL that I hate the second most only being Old Mile High Stadium, which is fortunately demolished. We get 25 South Colorado Springs, which is the correct choice. Going south out of Denver, Colorado Springs is the biggest city you're going to pass for some time. E470 North toll Limon. Do you think there's ever been a car ever who's driven south on 25 through downtown Denver, then gotten on the toll road to loop back around to 70 and then driven to Limon? No, nobody. Never. In Colorado Springs, we get 25 South Pueblo. Of course, Limon. We're not talking about Limon until we get to 70, or until I make my video about the worst control cities ever, where Limon will surely be number 1. In Pueblo I do think was a fine choice from Colorado Springs, because again, it's the biggest thing for a long time. But in Pueblo, we get 25 South Trinidad, which makes no sense at all. I mean, this is Colorado being provincial like New Mexico. Trinidad's the last sort of city in Colorado before you cross the state line. This is not a good sign at all. This should either be Albuquerque, which is a little far, but it's by far the biggest city you're going to hit, or you could make an argument for Raton, because a lot of traffic can cut off Raton onto US 87 for the shortcut from Denver to Dallas, or Denver to Texas in general. But Trinidad, no. So we see, yeah, Colorado City 20, Trinidad 79. Albuquerque does make it onto the sign at 322, but as soon as it's on, it's back off. Now we just have Aguilar and Trinidad. Within Trinidad, no surprise, it is now 25 South Raton. Again, there can be an argument made for Raton, but this really should be Albuquerque. In Raton, briefly, we get 25 South Springer, which makes no sense at all. Springer is a small town, and the junction in Springer would not be useful if you're on southbound 25, because it's a bunch of backtracking. It'd only be useful on northbound 25. So there's no reason to sign Springer. This should be Santa Fe or Albuquerque. At another intersection in Raton, we see 25 South Las Vegas, which is a little better than Springer, but still a horrible sign because they mean Las Vegas, New Mexico. At least in this case, if one is driving to Las Vegas, Nevada, this is the correct route to go. But you wouldn't know that because they're not going to sign Las Vegas after Las Vegas, New Mexico. So yeah, now we get Springer, Las Vegas, Santa Fe. Albuquerque should be on this sign. In Las Vegas, we get 25 South Santa Fe. There is, of course, no overhead sign on 25 to look at because Las Vegas, New Mexico is not a large place. In Santa Fe, we now get South Albuquerque. This is the correct choice. And now in Albuquerque, we get 25 South Las Cruces, which is okay. I think El Paso would actually be the best one here because El Paso is much bigger than Las Cruces and only a few miles beyond it, but it's against the rules in New Mexico to ever sign something that's not in New Mexico, it seems. So Las Cruces is really the best we could hope for. I think I remember seeing this sign driving on this road in the 90s and it being signed South Belen. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but a small town that's like 50 miles down the road that absolutely should have never been signed. So Las Cruces is at least a one-up from that. Yeah, here is the town in question, 10 miles away, then Socorro, 53 miles, and Las Cruces, 199. Finally, when we get to US 70 in Las Cruces, we finally do get 75 South El Paso with a cool 6 miles left to go on I-25. And here is the end of I-25 at I-10. So it defaults onto 10 East El Paso, and then you have 10 West with the horrible control city of Deming, which we talked about in the I-10 video. Thank you for watching Control City Freak. I do hope you decide to like and subscribe. That would just make my day. My name is Todd, and keep on trucking.